Good morning, Council Member Todd and members of the Council. Thank you for this opportunity to testify today. My name is Hermela Kabede, and I'm the Executive Director of the Ethiopian Community Center located in Ward 4. Established in 1980, the center is the oldest African immigrant community organization in the District of Columbia. It was established specifically to address the needs of a growing African immigrant community. I stand before you representing an organization that has a 38-year track record, working diligently to provide critical safety net and community service programs to thousands of residents and families across the district. I have testified before the council many times before, and year after year, I have joined others in requesting increased funding for the Mayor's Office on African Affairs and its African Community Grant Program. I was also one of the many community leaders who advocated for the establishment of the grant program. Today, I want to continue to speak to the urgency of addressing the growing needs and concerns of the district's African immigrant population by increasing funding available for the grant program. Even though ECC, or the Ethiopian Community Center, received funding for 3 consecutive years from 2014 to 2016, the average amount of grant received barely covered the cost of providing the services and outcomes we were able to produce. While the establishment of the African Community Grant Program has been a great symbolic step, it has yet to make a real impact and dent in addressing pressing needs in the district's African immigrant communities. In addition to supporting the expansion of the African Community Grant Program, I also want to express that allocation of these funds be disbursed thoughtfully to ensure that African-led organizations with deep ties in the community are supported and nurtured. We all know how important it is to build a culturally and linguistically specific civic infrastructure for immigrant communities through community-based organizations that mirror the communities they serve. There are a few established African-led organizations in the district's otherwise vibrant civic landscape, and we look to the African Community Grant Program to strengthen and invest in such organizations. The city must therefore do a better job of ensuring that appropriate funding is designated to support the capacity and infrastructure of trusted community-based organizations through the Mayor's Office on African Affairs Grants Program. The Ethiopian Community Center and other African community organizations in the district work diligently and often with shoestring or non-existent budget to support the new African immigrants as they overcome many challenges. These organizations have earned the trust of the community, serve as important community hubs, and are uniquely positioned to provide a safe net and bridge for families who call DC their home. These organizations are also critical allies and a resource to DC government agencies who work to ensure a decent quality life for all residents. We are critical to the development and sustainability of a thriving African community in DC, and I ask that the city invest in us. Without a real investment in our community and urgent actions from the council, the mayor, and the district as a whole to equitably fund and support an organization like ours, we will not be able to continue offering services that allow our most vulnerable residents to learn English, join the workforce, support their children's education, and contribute to the social and economic vitality of this city. In light of increasingly hostile policies towards immigrants and the pressing needs African immigrants are facing here in the district, such as lack of meaningful access to services, lack of affordable housing, gentrification, disproportional rates of unemployment and underemployment, compounded by issues of cultural and linguistic barriers, it's vital that the city support organizations such as ours who are in the trench to mitigate these issues. This community is highly underserved, and if organizations like the Ethiopian Community Center cease to exist, we will be leaving countless families in complete isolation and cut off from our civic process. I therefore urge the Council to put forth a budget that reflects the commitment that I know you have for preserving, cultivating, enhancing the many diverse immigrant communities that make the District of Columbia a truly welcoming, inclusive, and vibrant home for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Maya.
Good morning, Mr. Todd, the chairman, and other council members present. My name is Ifi N. Wabuku. I'm the executive director of the African Women's Cancer Awareness Association, located in Ward 5 at 2015 Rhode Island Avenue, Northeast Washington, D.C. Our organization has been working with African immigrants who are uninsured, underinsured, and underprivileged for the past 13 years. The mission of this organization is to reduce the burden of cancer on African immigrants and their families. As you well know, the Washington metropolitan area has the second largest number of foreign-born population. Washington, D.C. has approximately 16,000 to 18,000 African immigrants living in the district, representing 17.1% of the total foreign-born population. African immigrants live mainly in Ward 4, 2, 1, 6, 8, 7, and 5 respectively. 26.2% of these African immigrants lack health insurance coverage. This is where the services of our organization become invaluable. With the current FY19 OAA community grant, our organization is striving to include health literacy and screening for chronic diseases in African communities in the District of Columbia. The goal of this project is to expand the health literacy and chronic diseases screening rates among African immigrants by conducting educational outreach events to increase awareness of cancer, diabetes, hypertension, and providing follow-up referrals and navigation support services to assist the African communities to receive free and low-cost screening when indicated. We plan to screen for diabetes and hypertension to at least 200 Washington African immigrants, ages 18 years and older. We also have included health, wellness, and fitness program to serve 225 African immigrants. That has increased our traffic. African immigrants, we will provide culturally and linguistic appropriate breastfed literacy to at least 800 African immigrants who live in the district. We plan to refer 65 income eligible African immigrant women over 40 years of age for mammography screening. We will also provide patient navigation services to 60 women who are referred. AWCAA anticipates that these services will serve 1,350 residents of African immigrants living in the district. Having said this, I advocate that more funding be allocated to the Mayor's Office on African Affairs to allow the various organizations continue to serve and meet the needs of African immigrant community. I will conclude by thanking the Council for giving me this opportunity to present to you the wonderful work that the Mayor's Office on African Affairs is doing in the African immigrant community. We pray and hope that they will get more funding so we can continue the work that we do. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.
Good morning. My name is Adrienne Schreiber, and I'm the Executive Director of Multicultural Community Service, and we are a 3-year grantee of the Mayor's Office on African Affairs. MCS is a 501c3 organization that has provided interpretation and translation services and workforce development training since 1997. Our programs include our rigorous 70-hour community interpreter certification course, a day-long translators and interpreters professional development workshop, and many smaller skill-building classes. We've certified over 300 community interpreters to speak Amharic, Tigrinya, Oromo, French, Arabic, and more. MCS and other area organizations realized that there was a critical need for culturally competent interpreters who were not only accurate and knowledgeable in their translations, but who also have the trust of the communities they represent. The demanding training programs that we jointly sponsor with the Mayor's Office on African Affairs have ensured that the quality and accuracy of the oral language interpretation services being offered not only meet but surpass the minimums required by the DC Language Access Act of 2004. MCS would like to continue to offer community interpreter trainings in the District of Columbia as we've done in previous years, funding dependent, with participants completing 60 classroom hours of study focused on consecutive interpreting skills, cultural competency, telephonic and conference interpretation, note-taking, DC Language Access Act policies, and a 10-hour practice internship. We are also launching a Trainer of Trainers program to be able to offer the course more frequently with a larger roster of qualified instructors. And additionally, we're launching an affordable language access program for DC residents who cannot afford the full cost of language services. Thanks to the support of the Mayor's Office on African Affairs, DC residents with limited English proficiency can call upon well-trained and qualified interpreters to facilitate their communication needs. We can say without hesitation and with full confidence that in the District of Columbia, access to language interpreters is not an exclusive privilege reserved only for high-level government officials or diplomats. We've seen lives changed, and as you've heard and will continue to hear extensively today, our mission of inclusive civic participation continues to grow and expand as the diverse communities of DC are nurtured and cultivated. Multicultural Community Service has worked closely with the Mayor's Office on African Affairs for 3 years through the African Community Development Grant program for our language services program, and we will be seeking to expand our work through other constituency office partnerships and collaborations. Their support has been instrumental in working to reduce language barriers for DC's African residents, creating opportunities for proficient and bilingual residents, and building a stronger citywide understanding of emerging non-traditional languages spoken by DC's immigrant and bilingual community. Office on African Affairs works closely with us to ensure that our program goals are funded, supported, and sustainable in our community. We have frequent communication, monthly and quarterly reporting, and ongoing conversations to ensure that our needs as a grantee are met, as well as the overarching goals of the Mayor's Office on African Affairs. As we see DC's local communities expand with new residents from across the African continent, language interpretation is a necessary first step towards inclusive civic participation. MCS firmly believes in supporting the LEP community members by giving them the tools to communicate and fully engage in the civic life of the community. Without language assistance, residents suffer significant strain on their finances as well as quality of life. I'd like to request that the Mayor's Office on African Affairs see a considerable increase in their budget. Their work is admirably performed by a dedicated but quite small staff. The grant funding is a relatively new line item in the budget, and it is nowhere close to sufficiently meet the needs of African residents across the city. When compared to the other constituency offices, MOAA's allocation is simply not on par with the resources available. Funding should proportionally match the population served. I highly commend the work performed by my colleagues here today, and I applaud the efforts to ensure that the African communities in the District of Columbia can access services without substantial constraints or barriers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Good morning, Chairperson Todd and all the members of the Committee on Budget Oversight hearing. My name is Noel Carlo Bonjo Gandu. I'm an acting commissioner at the Mayor's Office on African Affairs. It is a pleasure to be here today and to testify. Mayor's Office on African Affairs' mission is to improve the quality of life of the DC African-born immigrants by providing community-based grants, advocacy, community relations, and outreach services to African residents. Mayor's Office of African Affairs allowed DC African residents to have a full range of human services, health, education, housing, economic development, and employment opportunities. The DC African communities count approximately 16,000 African-born residents, which is about 20% of the district's entire immigrant population, and is the highest portion of African-born residents of any major city in the United States. So as the newest and fastest growing immigrant group, the community partakes in and contribute to the cultural and economic fabric of the local and national community. So Mayor Office of African Affairs programs are designed to accomplish the following: identification of additional funding sources to have greater on educational outcomes for African children and youth, facilitate greater access to economic development resources among DC African-owned business, assist Africans in acquiring workforce skills that help them succeed in and foster the growth of a new economic in the district, coordinate different events to identify and solicit feedback on issues affecting the African community and develop a strategic plan to address them. Top issues include affordable housing, education, language access, public safety, and economic development. So continue to make a strong investment in community development programs through our grants program. So pursue opportunities to provide services to DC African population through public-private partnership with African-based service organizations, private charities, and other public and private groups. We thank Mayor Bowser and DC City Council for being proactive in providing support and funds to DC immigrants. But unfortunately, the budget that the Mayor Office of African Affairs receives is not enough to serve our dynamic African immigrant community. There are needs for additional funding and resources for our communities members who contribute in countless ways to the economic, social, and cultural fabric of the District of Columbia. So we need a significant increase in the grant fund received by Office of African Affairs. The Office of African Affairs have reduced staffs compared to the workload, so employees and interns have to wear multiple hats to take on various responsibilities, including consultant services, grant management, programming, language outreach, communication, just to name a few. So with a growing number of African-born immigrants and the actual political climate where immigrants are targeted, the Mayor Office of African Affairs needs more staff to be able to serve our dynamic community. So we support the effort of the Mayor Office of African Affairs as an excellent steward of the resources provided and urge this leadership to support efforts to further engage and develop additional pathways for African residents to access Mayor Bowser's vision for the district. This concludes my remarks, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to testify and thank Council Member Todd and the full committee for the opportunity.
So good morning. As stated, I'm Reverend Andre Towner, and I serve as the Minister to Engage Communities with the District of Columbia Baptist Convention. We are deeply grateful for the opportunity to speak in this forum and are dedicated to joining and assisting your efforts to ensure our government effectively and justly serves all district residents. This year, we began a partnership with the Mayor's Office of African Affairs to conduct a program to address the high levels of hepatitis B within the District of Columbia's African immigrant community. This community makes up approximately 17% of the district's foreign-born population. Our program goals are to increase the level of awareness, testing, and treatment for hepatitis B within this community. To accomplish our goals, we are educating community leaders such as pastors, civic leaders, and business owners, along with the other members of the district's African immigrant community. Our original grant proposal, which we submitted to the Mayor's Office of African Affairs, included a $20,000 budget. However, due to the Mayor's Office of African Affairs budget constraints, we only received $2,500 towards this work. Due to this, we've had to drastically scale back and or delay work, which is so vital to the district's African immigrant community, but also the affiliated organizations such as health care providers and educational facilities. Specific examples of program adjustments due to reduced funding levels are elimination of on-site hepatitis B testing, elimination of on-site initial emergency treatment, elimination of follow-up services to ensure residents who tested positive are connected with healthcare providers, and decreased levels of direct contact with members of the district's African immigrant community. And so we deeply believe in and have been impressed by the level of support we receive from the Mayor's Office of African Affairs. And we believe that if their budget is increased, that it will help not only the district's African immigrant community, but it will help make the district a better and more, help all of its residents flourish. And so I'd like to thank you all for allowing me and my organization the opportunity to be a part of this process, and this concludes my testimony.
Thank you very much for your testimony, ma'am. If you would state your name for the record.
Virginia Blackwell, Practice Manager, MedStar Georgetown Transplant Liver Screening Program. Thank you. Thank you, Councilman Todd, council members, for letting us be here today. This is our first year as part of the Mayor's Office of African Affairs for the grants, and we received $5,000 to assist with liver screening program. This enables us to go out into the communities here in Washington, D.C. and abroad that allows us to do educational and testing of hepatitis B, hepatitis C, and elevated liver functions. Part of this is done through blood testing, which allows us to do a consult with the patients afterwards to give different information such as diet and exercise programs that may be able to assist them with not obtaining cirrhosis out of a fatty liver situation. It also allows us to just keep them educated on HPV for mothers that may be pregnant and need assistance with therapy during the time of their pregnancies and to keep it from spreading to their unborn children. This program has definitely been well received by the community. We found that in our first event, which was on Martin Luther King Day, we had out of the amount of people that we did, we found 20% that actually tested in some way that needed assistance. I do ask that you continue to give extended resources and hopefully additional resources to keep this going. I have found as a member of this council with all of the other grantees that it has been very fundamental in assisting with language services for those who are in need. We have a very diverse community that needs additional resources for language interpreters. We have also assisted with getting people with the needs for getting the literacy that they need as far as getting English skills here in this area. All of these things may not seem very important to us as citizens here, but for these people that are coming from abroad who think that just because I get vaccinated for something, I am cured or I don't have it, that's not always the case. They haven't been tested, they could be a live carrier. And until we actually test them, they're not aware of that. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here today, and I hope that you will continue to fund this program.
Thank you very much for your testimony, ma'am.
My name is Joanna Leblanc, and I am with the Commission on African Affairs. Good morning, Council Member Brendan Todd, Chairperson of the Committee on Government Relations. My name again is Joanna Leblanc. I serve as a Commissioner on the Commission on African Affairs. The Commission on African Affairs works in collaborative manner with the Mayor's Office on African Affairs as an advocate for the various African communities in the district with a wide range of responsibilities, from submitting an annual needs assessment and analysis report to the Mayor, the Council, and the Office on the state of African communities in DC, to bringing attention to any cases of neglect, abuse, incidents of bias against Africans, and also to commenting on proposed district legislation. The Commission currently consists of 15 commissioners from various African countries throughout the continent, with one member from the Republic of Haiti. The commission members include healthcare professionals, district employees, graduate students, attorneys, NGO coordinators, and administrators, small business owners, educators, all committed to engaging, promoting, and developing our robust and vital communities. And it is on behalf of that community that I am present to testify in front of you today. According to a recent article from the Pew Research in February 2017, the African immigrant population nationwide has grown steadily from about 80,000 in 1970 to 2.1 million today nationwide. But the rate has accelerated, and the highest growth has occurred in the past decade. The federal agency U.S. Census Bureau reported that the Washington metropolitan region is also the second most popular destination for African-born immigrants, after New York City and ahead of Los Angeles, Atlanta, and Minneapolis. More than 161,000 African-born people live in the district and nearby suburbs, with Ethiopians leading at 35,200, followed by Nigerians at 19,600, and Ghanaians with 18,400. These staggering figures reflect the changing face and the needs of the District of Columbia. In order for the DC government to provide appropriate and culturally sensitive constituent services for this massive presence and increased influx of Africans, it is critical that the established DC Office on African Affairs be provided with the financial means whereby such integral services may be provided. To that end, we as members of the district's African community request that the DC City Council Committee on Government Operations to increase the Mayor's Office on African Affairs fiscal budget 2019 to $1 million, which would include but not limited to $300,000 for additional grants to local African community and nonprofit organizations, $220K for additional FTEs, and $50,000 for operating cost above the mayor's proposed budget of $572,000 for the fiscal year 2019. We have seen how significant budget increases in the offices of Latinos and Asian Pacific Island affairs led to significant positive differences within those respective communities. The fact of the matter is, the OLA has a budget of over $1 million for Latino community, while grants dispersed from OAA into the African community is only at $100,000. This proposed budget request will provide greater equity between the Mayor's Office on African Affairs and the other immigrant offices' proposed budgets for the fiscal year 2019, such as the Office of Latino Affairs and the Office on Asian and Pacific Islander. While we appreciate the need for fiscal responsibility on the part of the Committee on Government Operations, we also recognize the vital role that OAA plays in this community and the very real fact that without adequate funding, its roles, responsibilities, and impact within and on behalf of the DC African community are severely hindered. In closing, the Commission on African Affairs will submit a fully detailed request in writing to your office. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bonjour, salam alaikum, my mother's native language, Ajiga. My name is Sylvie Bello, and I'm with the Cameroon American Council. Councilmember Todd, thank you so much for this session. Thank you for putting the Office of African Affairs first in this panel, because the good book says the least shall be the first. in all of your wonderful agencies, African Affairs, unfortunately, we are the least. As my colleague mentioned, we are here seeking $1 million for Africans, which does not even constitute a fraction of how much we Africans contribute in taxes into all of the agencies right here in DC. Latinos have $1 million in grants alone. They do not make up 10 times the population of Africans. We have $100,000 in grants. They have 1 million plus, and they are not 10 times Africans here in DC. Asian Affairs has about 10 staffers in their office, yet they are most definitely not double the population of Africans. They have at least double their staffers in their office compared to the staffers in Office of African Affairs, yet again, they are not, absolutely not double the population. The four offices you're gonna hear today, the least among them are Office of African Affairs. We are requesting $1 million. Why? In this very troubling political climate, with Trump and others creeping out of the woodworks, Blacks are being targeted. Immigrants are being targeted. There is the Muslim ban. Now, let's look at our two neighboring offices. Asians and Pacific Islanders, our neighbors who are Asians and Pacific Islanders, are affected. Their families and friends who are immigrants. That affects the Latino community as well. It affects us as African immigrants. As Black people, Africans in DC, let me be specific, we tend to be about 90% Black. For the Latino community, I'm not sure what percentage of them self-identify as Black and what percentage of them are involved and targeted as part of the Black Lives Matter. So I'm sure their director will be able to put that. But we do know that there are Latinos who are Black, but I just don't know what's percentage of them. So when it comes to the Muslim ban by Trump, of the 7 countries for the Muslim ban by Trump, Sudan, Libya, Chad, Somalia are from Africa, many of them right here in the district. In this horrible political climate, we, as the Office of African Affairs and the Africans in DC, are the least served because we're triple Black, immigrant, Muslim ban. So when we're asking for this number in the grants to be increased, we would like for you to triple that number for the triple threats we're experiencing right now. And if you're wondering where would that money come from, we would like to refer you to Census 2010 that says that African immigrants are the 3rd highest income earners. We are pumping lots and lots of tax dollars into every single agency, and we get exactly pretty much zero. Pretty much zero. We would love for the monies that our businesses are putting into the district government, the monies that our African immigrants who are your nurses, your cab drivers, and every other services out there that we do. We would love for part of the monies we put into the revenue of DC to come to serve us. Why? Because in the 2020 census, our numbers are going to significantly increase. And when those numbers increase, they have stated on there that they're going to request for U.S. citizenship. So we're asking for 2 staffers, 1 for business. I run the African, I see I have 18
Yeah,
seconds.
well, no, you're 20 seconds over.
I'm 20 seconds, okay.
Over your
1
5,
for
so
business,
that's
I'm
10 more seconds.
Thank you so
Okay.
much. 1 for business staffer to make sure that the funds and the language access and everything else that can allow us to grow further, because we're already third income earners. We need a business staffer, just like OLA has, and just like Asian Affairs has.
Okay.
The second thing is we need a communication staffer. So if you're wondering where would the money go, business staffer, communication staffer, and to triple the grants for the triple threats we're experiencing.
I got it. Thank you.
Merci. Thank you.
Thank you. The committee will call on our government witness now, and it is the practice of the Committee on Government Operations to ask that all government witnesses swear in. The committee calls on our government witness, Mr. Mamadou Samba, Director of the Mayor's Office on African Affairs. Welcome, Director. If you would please state your name for the record, and then we may proceed with the oath. Okay, raise your right hand. Do you solemnly affirm under the penalty of perjury that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. You may proceed with your testimony. If you turn your mic on. Okay.
Is it on? All right. Good morning, Councilmember Todd, members of the committee, and committee staff. My name is Mamadou Samba, and I'm the Director of the Mayor's Office on African Affairs. I am pleased to testify before you today. This week, Mayor Bowser has presented a fair shot, the fiscal year 2019 budget and fiscal plan, the district's 23rd consecutive budget, consecutive balanced budget. This budget does more to make Washington, D.C. a place where people of all backgrounds and in all stages of life are able to live and thrive by making key investment in infrastructure, education, affordable housing, health, and human services, economic opportunity, seniors, and public safety. These investments reflect the key priorities identified by district residents at budget engagement forums and telephone town halls held during the budget formulation process. The mission of the Mayor's Office on African Affairs is to ensure that the district's African communities are connected to the full range of services available within the District of Columbia, to monitor service delivery to those communities, and to make recommendations to the Mayor to promote the welfare of those communities. Such tasks are conducted through our 6 programmatic areas, including the African community and engagement, including community outreach engagement, language access, multicultural awareness, capacity building, youth engagement, and the African Community Grant and the Hepatitis B Outreach Initiative. The Mayor's Office on African Affairs budgets funds 5 full-time employees responsible for providing services to the African community, and those employees include a language access coordinator, a grants management specialist, and a community outreach person, including myself and the deputy director position. The budget allocates nearly $130,000 in grant funding for the African Community Grant and the Hepatitis B Outreach Grants Program. Combined, these 2 programs have provided funding to 11 African community-based organizations who deliver programs and services in health, language access, financial literacy, multicultural awareness, jobs, and economic development. The proposed budget provides the resources that MOAA needs to fulfill the FY19 mandates and the strategic goals. In FY19, the Mayor's Office on African Affairs will continue to utilize fiscally responsible strategies and effective engagement to provide services to the underserved African communities by partnering with African community-based organizations such as those you heard from earlier, grantees, members of the Commission on African Affairs, and our sister agencies. We will also continue to engage with the diverse ethnic and faith-based associations, particularly the French-speaking residents, to make full use of the Language Access Act and to ensure that a district's inability to speak English does not become a barrier to full integration and accessing services. During FY19, we will also continue to work with the Office of the Chief Technology Officer on our very successful African Diaspora Coding Academy, which have provided web and mobile application development training to over 100 African residents. In closing, the resources allocated to the Mayor's Office on African Affairs will play a critical role in supporting residents' efforts to reach and remain on a pathway to the middle class. The Council and this committee are critical allies in this effort, and I appreciate your work to ensure that we operate effectively and efficiently. I look forward to our continued work together to achieve our shared goals and to give all residents a fair shot to benefit from Washington, D.C. and continued prosperity. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Director, for your testimony, and certainly thank you for your work and commitment to the residents in the African community here in the District of Columbia. We'll just jump right into the questions. In the fiscal year 2018 budget, your office received an additional FTE for grants management specialists. With the addition of grants management specialists, is your office able to meet its staffing needs?
Yes, in FY18 we have a grants management specialist, which we haven't had before. And so this person is responsible with working directly with the grantees that you heard from earlier in making sure that they help with managing of the grant to make sure that they coordinate between those organizations and our organization.
Okay, and do they work with the grantees to make sure that the dollars are getting to the targeted populations?
Yes, I mean, this person is involved in the grants process from the time we send out a notice of funding availability to the time that the grants are awarded. And so he also conducts regular site visits, both announced and unannounced, where he goes and usually sits with the executive directors, attends events, reviews their budget, make sure that at the end of the quarter, when they do submit a report, what was initially planned to be spent is actually spent, and to provide an explanation for why that's not the case. So he is continually engaged with the grantees to make sure that the monies are going to the African communities as they are intended, as they were intended.
Excellent. In fiscal year 2018, your office received $40,000 for the hepatitis outreach grant. You currently have 4 grantees, and at your performance oversight hearing earlier this month, we heard about how impactful this grant has been to date. Do you know how many clients have been served?
I don't have the exact...
Across the grantees, the 4 grantees?
No, I don't have the exact number because grantees, so they got, this is the middle of the second quarter. They sort of received the money a bit late in the first quarter, so most of the grantees are actually just now starting the program. And so we will get a better idea of what, how many people were intended to serve, but initially combined, when they all submitted their proposal, they expect to serve about 3,000 African residents.
Across the 4 grantees?
Across the 4 grantees, yes.
The African Community Grant Program is intended to fund community-based organizations whose programs provide culturally and linguistically targeted services and the resources to the district African residents and businesses. In FY18, how many African community grants were awarded?
In FY18, we awarded 7 African community grants. Total 11, but 7 of those were the African community grant. The other 4 were the hepatitis grant program.
Do you know how many organizations applied out of the 7 that received?
We received about 29 applications. We received about 29 applications from various community-based organizations.
And how does this compare to previous years?
It's consistent. I mean, on average, we get about 20 to 25. So this year, 29 is fairly consistent.
Okay. Do you find that the quality of the applications and the work done within the grant funds improves each year?
Yeah, actually, we are getting more and more stronger proposals year after year. You know, organizations who have been working with us for 3, 4, 5 years at this point know what we're expecting, what we're looking for, and so we're getting proposals that are very strong, and they are stronger because you see a lot of the organizations that are working together. You see 2 organizations that used to provide services in silos that are now providing services together. And from 2015, when at the start of Bowser administration, at the end of the year for the grant, we saw an increase of 33% more in the number of the people that we serve compared to before the Bazo administration, and we've been very consistent with that number
Okay.
since.
So what types of services and programming do your grantee organizations provide? I've heard about hepatitis outreach and testing, and what additional
Yeah, you heard about
services?
hepatitis outreach and testing. You heard about cancer awareness. Cancer is a very critical issue in the African community, and so the African Women Cancer Awareness Association provides screening to African women. You also have life assets, which provide financial literacy and support to African entrepreneurs that are looking to start businesses in the city and get access to funding. You have Kankuran West Africa Dance Company that have been in the city for 30 years. And had it not been because of the funding that they get from us, they would have moved to Maryland. And so they use that funding to not only stay in the district, but also help us to make sure that they tear down those barriers that exist in African communities, where they provide multicultural awareness dance classes to people who are interested in African culture. And you also have other grantees that provide services when it comes to the Ethiopian Community Services, for example, and MCS, which provides interpretation training to Africans who need it.
How does your office work with other district government agencies to connect residents with services that the government currently provides? I think I heard in Ms. Bello's testimony that there is a need for African businesses to connect with your office or the district government. So how have you worked with the Department of Small and Local Business Development to get the resources to the African businesses in the district?
For the most part, we liaise with them, and we connect Africans who reach out to us for those services with the department. And we are not small business experts. And the mistake that we don't want to make, that I don't want to make, is to assume that I am a small business expert. So I want to leave that to those agencies, so that when somebody reaches out to me, we connect them with those resources, and we follow up to make sure that whatever services that they were seeking, they do have. We do work with the DCRA, the Department of Small and Regulatory, the Department of DCRA. I'm not sure what it's there. This Department of Small and Consumer Regulatory.
Yes. So many acronyms across our government.
So many acronyms. And so, for example, one of the partnerships that we have with them is we conducted outreach on their behalf. This is in 2016, when synthetic drug was an issue. And so we partnered with them to do outreach in the African community, especially with African businesses, store owners, on the effects of synthetic drugs, why they shouldn't be engaged in selling it. And while we connect with a particular African business, we also take outreach material from DC, DSLBD that they can benefit from. So it's a multi-hat approach. While we are touching one resident, we make sure that any other information that they may need is provided to them.
Okay, very good. How much of your office's budget is dedicated to community outreach and engagement?
I don't understand that question. What do you mean?
Okay, if you could provide that to the committee.
Sure.
And what outreach and engagement efforts do you find to be the most helpful to the district's African community?
Public safety has been a very impactful initiative. I mean, we work with MPD. We've been working with them for the past, since 2015, to make sure that there's presence in the African community. Now, MPD is a regular fixture in our office. We engage day-to-day with the Special Liaison Division and African police officers who speak French and Amharic and other languages. And so we go with them every 2 weeks in African, hair salons, shops, and those community members know that they are less, now they are more likely to approach us on issues that they may be facing. So it's become a very critical and impactful ways. We also work with other MOAA agencies within our cluster to make sure that we conduct outreach together, so that, for example, when we go to a particular high school to do a fair, those students get to engage with us in other offices just as much.
Okay, very good. What fiscal obstacles, if any, is your office currently facing or anticipates facing in 2019?
No, I'm not sure if I can anticipate anything right now, but I will say perhaps, working with, seeing how passionate people are about these issues, and you were able to see some of it early on, and people, want to see, want to be provided more answers for why we're not doing certain things, and so all of that is a conversation to be had with them. But for the most part, we do a good job at providing services as much as we can, and being in a community just as much.
Okay, excellent. The committee doesn't have any further questions. I want to thank you, Director Samba, and your staff for all of your hard work and for your testimony today. Should the committee have any additional questions, we'll follow up with you in writing.
Thank you.
And